Welcome. You're listening to Coffee Break with Purdue Engineering, a podcast production from the Office of Future Engineers at Purdue University. In this podcast series, we discuss the many programs, majors, and opportunities found in Purdue Engineering through conversational interviews with staff, faculty, alumni, and current students. We hope you enjoy our show and it helps answer some of your questions about what it's like to be an engineering student at Purdue.
Well, welcome back to Purdue Engineering's Coffee Break podcast. We are starting a new series called Behind the Mic, where we will be looking at and talking to our
host.
Our host. My name's Amy Glenn. I'm the Associate Director of the Office of Future Engineers, and joining me is our host, Nick Buffo. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So hello, everyone. You've probably recognized my voice on this podcast by now. My name is Nick Buffo. I am a senior peer counselor here in the Office of Future Engineers. I've been working here for the last year or so, but been full-time for the last couple of months. So
awesome. So, Nick, would you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Like, where are you from, and how'd you end up in OFE?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Kansas City. I was born and raised there in Kansas City. And I came here to study biomedical engineering here at Purdue. And so I've graduated actually in this past December. And I'm also heading off to medical school. So I was on the PreMed track. And then how I found myself at Purdue, I got an email actually last summer that was, hey, we're hiring. And so I, put in my application and just to see kind of, what it was all about. And the rest is history since then.
Awesome.
So
we are so glad to have you in OFE. We would not have gotten these podcasts off the ground. It's something we've been wanting to do for a long time. So thank you very much for taking the lead on all that. And really wanted to kind of capture this because we're going to be saying goodbye to you this summer.
Yeah, it's going to be
sad.
I know.
It's
all kind of setting in.
We're much in denial about that. But so I wanted to kind of pick your brain, so to speak, before we say goodbye to you for the summer anyway and send you on your way. So you chose to go into healthcare. Mm-hmm. Why did you choose to go into the medical profession?
Yeah, so it kind of, I think, I've always kind of thought about this question as well, kind of as a motivation. And sometimes I don't always know exactly. I just kind of have always said it. But I think like back in probably middle school was really when I first kind of thought about, healthcare as a career and possibly being like a physician. And I think it originated with wanting to help people and kind of my interests in, being in science and math and that kind of thing, and I guess that STEM pathway. And so it was kind of a nice merge between that and still being outwardly facing with people and still being able to talk to them, but also be able to take care of them and, care for someone. And I think over the years has kind of morphed into this ability or wanting to commit this time, because I know if I want to commit extra and more studies, it wants to be to help people, and like I can utilize my ability or utilize my studies to help people. So it's kind of been over the time I've just kind of told myself, but more and more as I've gotten into the career I've kind of reaffirmed that. So.
Awesome. Now, did you have any family members that were involved with healthcare?
Yeah, so I will be or would be the first doctor in my family, at least within 3 or 4 generations. I think my great-great-grandfather or something was a doctor. Yeah. But my mother works in healthcare. She's a pharmaceutical sales representative. So I like actually remember growing up like on some of those take your kid to work days, and I would actually go with her to the into the offices and be with her. And so it was kind of fun to be able to do that. And again, she was on more of that sales side. And so then it was kind of like looking back on it, it's like, well, how does then that drug, can it help someone, and gotcha. I guess so. My mom works in healthcare and I've got family members that are, nursing staff and that kind of thing, but no one in my immediate family around me are doctors. They're all lawyers, and they tried to get me to be a lawyer, and I did not want to be one. Thank you, Dad, for that one.
Law, not your thing.
Not quite, no. I want to be more talking to people, and I know there's courts, but awesome. My dad does a lot of contracts and stuff, which is not interesting to me.
So what area of health or medical, what kind of doctor do you want to be?
Yeah, good question. So I still am kind of figuring that one out, but I'm going into it with an idea. I think I want to work in pediatrics.
Okay.
So I want to work with kids. I've kind of grown up, always been like a camp counselor. I've been in Big Brothers Big Sisters. And so it's always known that like I love to work with kids, and they're great, people. And so, and helping them with growth and, all of those things. So I know that it's at least going to be pediatrics, but whether kind of within that, I've thought cardiology as a possible pathway.
Okay.
I just took a course, and originally cardiology was kind of daunting to me. I was like, I don't want to get involved in it. And now I'm like, okay, well, that's actually really, really cool. And a lot of the engineering comes over to cardiology. And so, cardiology has been one, and then also orthopedics. I grew up playing sports, and I love sports medicine and functional sciences and that kind of thing, and looking at, how can we stay healthy in all of our activities. So that's kind of been, I guess, also there. So it's cardiology, orthopedics. I don't know quite yet. We'll see.
Okay.
I could end up doing something completely different. Who knows?
Well, and that happens, right?
Exactly.
Is you find those areas that you're like, wow, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
Or the people you work with help inspire that, I think.
100%.
So how and when did you connect PreMed with engineering? So you chose biomedical engineering. How did you figure that one out?
Yeah. So the funny story, actually, whenever I tell kind of this, is I actually never wanted to be an engineer. That was never quite my pathway after college. My brother's a construction engineer. And I always saw engineering to be something like building bridges, building, buildings, and more structural on that civil side of things.
Right.
And yep, there's mechanical engineers. And I know now kind of my engineering knowledge has kind of grown, but I always wanted to be a doctor. So I knew wherever I was going to college, I had to be pre-med in some ways. So I was always first wanting to pursue medical school. And so I was wanting to get a degree for that. I kind of later connected engineering by it was that merge, again, as I kind of mentioned, of that math and that science. It allowed me the ability to kind of problem solve and kind of work as in a creative setting, but also, still creating a mindset kind of thing. And so it was never engineering. It was always pre-med. And then I kind of took a shot in the dark and said, let's go engineering. And that's when I decided, where I was going at Purdue and the degree, because when I applied to colleges, it was very broad. I applied to probably 7 or 8 different majors, all still relating to medical sciences, but in whatever shape or form.
Right.
So,
So, we get the question often, or students will say, I'm interested in med school. I want to go pre-med. So why engineering versus pre-med? Is there a foundation to doing one over the other, or reason? Yeah.
So the good thing about being pre-med is you can be whatever major you want to be. So that's kind of the nice thing. And so it allows students, again, that flexibility to kind of see what their passions are, their pursuits are. And that's one of the things, to those high school students that when I talk about it is, what is kind of like, what's kind of driving you? What are the types of projects you like to work on? What are those things? And that can help kind of guide maybe a degree or a major pathway. So really, I think about pre-med whenever I explain it to people. It's considered like a concentration or a pathway, but really it's just a minor, essentially, is what it is. It's a couple additional courses, depending upon which major you choose. So for some majors, it can be a lot more extra courses, and for some, it can be a little bit easier. And so I guess finding that balance as well. But for students that, and looking at it, I always tell people, and again, engineering itself, the discipline of it, can be utilized everywhere. And that's one of the very nice things, is that it's a very universal concept. For me, engineering became a good backup in case I decided I didn't want to go to medical school.
Gotcha.
And I think that kind of is what has driven me a lot of when I have this conversation with students, is talking about, in whatever way, shape, or form you pick, you want to make sure that the degree that you're going to have is a great plan B.
Right.
And that was, I think, a big conversation I had with my parents, is having the plan B is very important to you, because at the end of the day, let's say medical school doesn't end up working out, whether you decide 3 years in, that's not your career path, whether you get in and you're like, this isn't for me. You want to make sure you have the ability to pivot.
Right.
And so I think engineering gave me a great pivot sequence of, I can still go be pre-med, still go to medical school, but also still have a very good job that's going to have, rewards at the end of it that will pay well and always be needed.
Gotcha.
I mean, I swear they always need engineers right now.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with engineering, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. So kind of along that lines, kind of focusing more within engineering, why we have both biomedical and biological here at Purdue. So Why did you choose biomedical versus biological?
Yeah, so the big difference between the two of them is, so biological is housed under the College of Agriculture here. And so a lot of their studies and classes are going to focus on food science. And so when I was looking at between the both of them, biomedical just stuck out because typically biomedical students are always working on medical devices or devices to help improve the health of the people around you. Biological, yes, have the ability to work on that, but their true like core coursework, and that I found kind of through the engineering your major sessions, biological is more focused on food science, and that's what a lot of their senior design projects go into. And they do have concentrations in like cellular biology and that kind of thing. But if we're thinking like true cardiac devices, pacemakers, stents, neurostimulation devices, those are all biomedical devices. And so that's kind of where it's encapsulated. And so for me, coming into it, it was the coursework that really decided it. But after now being in it, I found that like really, if you're wanting to work on the devices in the medical industry, biomedical engineering is kind of the place for you. But again, both are options, and biological actually in their coursework has organic chemistry. So one of the things with them being food science allows them to, they take organic chemistry within it. Biomedical does not.
Right.
They have a little bit more of the strengths in like the electronic classes and, a little bit more foundational engineering. And so you would have to add the organic chemistry onto the biomedical engineering degree.
Okay.
So that is the one kind of big difference that I always tell people, but I wouldn't let that sway you one way or another. It goes more with like, what are the types of projects you want to work on?
Right.
Medical devices versus like food science and food processing within the College of Agriculture.
I've always described it as biological is more the cellular and molecular structure versus biomedical is more tissues, joints, prosthetics, devices.
Yeah.
Is that kind of accurate?
It is. So pretty much like, it's kind of funny. Another good way to maybe describe it is like biological works on things you can't see. Biomedical works on things you can with the naked eye. And so, yes, in both, they do have devices. It's not fully universal. And biomedical, we work on cellular systems as well. But for the most part, the devices that we're creating are things that you can see and touch with your hands.
Right.
Biological is a little bit more like think vaccines, think, liquid solutions where it's going to happen cellularly and molecularly, but it's not quite going to happen.
You need a microscope.
You need a microscope to look at it. Exactly. And sometimes even with that, you can't even. So, but biomedical, it's a lot of times going to be tangible things that you can hold kind of thing. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, that's always a good one, I think, to help because but again, there's crossovers or layovers between the both of them. You can't go wrong with either. It just depends upon the core kind of principles, if that's devices versus another thing. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So let's see. How long did it take you to get your undergraduate degree?
So kind of one of the nice things about biomedical engineering, first of all, is it's a pretty flexible degree pathway. And really within the biomedical engineering curriculum, there's only 3.5 years of full like core curriculum. The this 8th semester is only elective classes. So that allows students, so for myself to be able to be pre-med and graduate in 4 years, or in my case, then 3.5, the ability to do that and then go directly to medical school, you have to have all of your core classes done by junior year to take the MCAT. Because you need to have the MCAT done a year before your application, and all of your applications are started in your junior year. So a year before you are even ready to head there. So it's a very early process. So you need to have it all done early. And so for me, I found that by having all those electives moved into those earlier semesters, both by utilizing summers and also, with my just standard kind of pathway, I actually ended up graduating in 3.5 years or 7 semesters from here, and took that 8th semester off, which is also very nice to have, because I am going directly to medical school. I don't have any time off, and a lot of students are taking gap years right now.
Wow.
So having no time off is, I will say now, having had it, everyone should have time off. You need a little bit of that time because it is a lot of studies. But yeah, for me, it ended up going only in 7 semesters, which was perfect for me. So. And I had several friends that also graduated early. So it's a pretty common thing in biomedical engineering. I don't know the specific numbers, but a lot of students do actually graduate early, which is kind of cool. So
I didn't realize the process and that the med school process started so early.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you need to have your MCAT taken preferably by like May of your junior year.
Wow.
And when you take the MCAT is when you need to have all of those classes done, biochemistry, organic chemistry, all those kind of core classes. So it's so early. It sucks.
Wow. So did Purdue help you make sure you're on track, and how were there resources?
Yes. So the kind of the thing with any sort of professional school, we have what they call the Pre-Professional Advising Office, or PPA. And they're the ones who kind of help to run all of the sort of advising for medical school, for law school, dentistry. And so they're kind of ones that I started meeting with my freshman year while I was here. So I'd advise students, when you meet with your advisor for your major, go meet with the pre-professional people as well. So you have to schedule your own appointments with them. But it's nice because I had kind of two advisors working together. And I would go to my first advisor in my major, I'd get all my classes done and kind of an idea of what I know I needed to take, then go to pre-professional, say, hey, is this going to meet everything? They would say, yep. And I'd go back to my advisor in my major and say, all right, ready to go. Just because of, engineering not being as popular of a major for pre-med. I know it's getting more and more popular, but specifically biomedical. A lot of our advisors aren't fully trained, and it's not necessarily in their job responsibilities to know the pre-med requirements. And so that's why you kind of work between two offices. I know they're trying to streamline it a little bit more now as it's becoming more and more of a popular pathway. But for now, it's kind of what you worked through as both of them. But Purdue definitely helped me. That Pre-Professional Advising Office has a class that you can take to learn about the process of applying. And I would encourage students to take that their sophomore year if they can, or their junior year, just because it'll cover how to prepare for the MCAT, how to prepare an application. And a lot of the times when I was taking the class, I already had started those things. So I'd already kind of taken the MCAT or that kind of thing. But yeah, so there's a class that you can help to learn the process and meet with the pre-professional advising. And there's tons of clubs. That's the other big thing. Yeah. There's I think at least 5 or 6 clubs that are dedicated to pre-med students that you can meet other pre-meds no matter what major you're in and get involved with, like volunteering and kind of some of those core things you need to be a pre-med student to get you ready for your application. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say Purdue helped me. And one of the things, one of the last things that I'll add too is Purdue itself, with it not having a medical school attached, a lot of people look at that as like a negative thing. And actually I found that for me, it ended up being more positive than some of my friends who went to a school that had a medical school attached to it. Because the one nice thing is, like, when there's research on our campus, the availability is only for really our Purdue students. Versus if there was a medical school, there'd be a lot of bleed over between medical school and undergrad. And so for me, I found it actually to be a pretty, okay experience. Whereas some of my friends that went to schools that had medical schools attached, a lot of their research, they were fighting with like medical students on it for. So
competing for those opportunities.
Exactly. Whereas there's so many more opportunities, especially for research here at Purdue, than some of the other schools that have that kind of connection. So.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Did you do research? What did you do?
Yeah. So I started in research my sophomore year, second year here at Purdue. And I simply reached out to a couple of different professors. I read their research online. The Biomedical Engineering Department has a pretty kind of concise website that shows you kind of all the professors and what are their research topics and areas. And so I read through and found, and this was when I was a lot more into like, I want to do orthopedics. I found Dr. Diva Chan, who does musculoskeletal research, and specifically a lot of her projects focus on osteoarthritis. So pain in the knees and pain in the joints from the degeneration of cartilage. And she's looking at all different areas of it, both the progression, or how does it actually start, but also after trauma, like after an injury. And so my research, I originally went in wanting to do hyaluronic acid research, which is a very common like molecule that's found in the knee and the synovial joint. And that was kind of my understanding of it. And I went and I was like, I want to do this. She's like, actually, I think you'd be better on this project. And so I ended up now doing my research with actually MRI studies, so magnetic resonance imaging. And the nice thing about MRIs, well, first of all, Purdue has like 3 or 4 of them on our campus.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Gosh,
you would never think
we had that many.
Yeah, we've got 3 Ts, which are typically the human grade, and then 7 Ts, which is a larger magnet, is typically used for small animal studies.
Okay. Vet school.
Vet school. Sense, yes. And so my research focused on looking at a new sequence that had been developed actually by another professor here at Purdue in the College of Science, Dr. Uze Amir, and he developed a sequence that looked at the sodium concentration in your knee. So. Without getting, I guess, too nerding out over here, essentially how much cartilage can be determined by the sodium concentration, because it's, again, a whole chemistry and molecular thing in your knee that happens. But we can't actually like cartilage itself is a soft tissue. So you can't quite like just image it and say, I know this concentration. but we can look at
Right.
the molecules in the knee or in that area to tell how much it is. So sodium ended up being the place that we could look at. And so my study looked at how can we utilize this new sequence that Dr. Uzay Amir developed and then implement that into possibly a clinical setting of, hey, how do we then maybe take this and Dr. Amir's scan times go down from, we're talking normally it's 17 to 18 minutes.
Okay.
We've accelerated down to 7 and 3 minutes. So
wow.
it'd be a quick diagnostic technique. And so that's what our translation is for it. So again, I know we're getting too far into it, but it looked at, thank you. It really ended up looking at, what is kind of the human involvement with it and how can we track it. And that was why Dr. Chan put me on that project, because she knew, again, my whole perspective, her whole thing wanted to go to medical school. So she's like, let's get you in more of a forward human interaction. And so we scanned human patients and developed their data. And so it was nice to, work with a patient, healthy patients, and scan their knees. So
interesting.
Yeah. But
I know that things like sodium and potassium and magnesium, those all impact our tissues and joints. And
it is.
Yeah.
It's crazy
that
how
would
much.
Make sense.
Oh yeah, I know. And you start diving into getting on that detail. It's kind of crazy to look at, what all is in your body and how can we image it and utilize that to possibly benefit and understand your, structural components of your human body. Yeah. Wow. This is biomedical engineering right here. Again, I'm not creating a product that so that's why it's not always quite, easy to put it into that. But I'm creating a process or a sequence or a flow for maybe a clinician to use in a doctor's office setting. And so that, I guess, in and of itself, in its essence, is biomedical engineering. Yeah, it's engineering. Exactly. Taking something that someone just created, implementing it, and finding, is it efficable? Does it actually work? Does it do what we need it to do?
Right.
So, yeah.
So you did research.
I did. They trusted me with a $2 million machine in my sophomore year.
Wow.
They were like, here, let's go with an operator and show you an MRI machine. And so, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's pretty trusting.
Yeah, they are pretty trusting of it. So,
so did you do any internships or was it all research?
Yeah. So I did an internship my summer after my sophomore year, my second year here at Purdue. And it was more of a clinical internship. So it wasn't a traditional engineering one. I didn't go work for an engineering company. I actually worked for a company called Christus Health down in Austin, Texas is where I was at, in a little city called New Braunfels. That's halfway between Austin and San Antonio. It was a hot summer, but I loved it. It was 105 every day. It was awesome. I know a lot of people may not like that, but for me coming out of here, it was great. But it was a fun internship where I got to shadow doctors throughout rotations. I got about 50 or so shadowing hours across the Christus Health kind of brand and seeing orthopedics and cardiology and family medicine and OBGYN and, urology as well and ear, nose, and throat, like all of the different specialties that I could possibly choose in medical school. So I got to shadow them, get a day with them and learn a little bit more of what are their everyday lives. But then also I worked in an urgent care as a medical assistant.
Oh, okay.
And so I got to actually treat patients. So we were still, 2022 was still a pretty strong COVID time. It was that resurgence in the summer of all of our COVID cases. If we all remember that time, actually that was 2021. Now that I say it, I think I had 21 or 22. I can't remember. It's been so long now. I know it's a couple years.
Time has flown.
Time has flown. Yeah. But anyways, we were seeing a resurgence in COVID cases. And so a lot of my treating was respiratory illness. So I was testing a lot of people, but we also were seeing flu A come back in the middle of the summer, which is never usually the case.
Right.
So we were seeing a lot of flu and a lot of COVID, but then also I helped with orthopedic injuries and casting. And it was just a really kind of cool experience to get a exposure to the medical industry and more of a day-to-day, kind of job of, let's work in an urgent care where you see a lot of stuff. We were everything. We would come through our doors.
Wow.
How to escalate and treat emergency situations. We had a couple of those, and having my training as an emergency medical technician allowed myself to kind of implement, some of our strategies of getting that patient, on an EKG, getting some of their test results back. And we were able to do all these things in the clinic where normally you don't have some of those in the ambulance, but then we could get them right over as the ambulance was coming. We could do all kind of those tests. And so it was nice to, it was very kind of eye-opening to work with a nurse practitioner on that, of activating that and, doing it. So
so you learn the whole triage thing and
exactly. Oh yeah, all of that. That was my primary job, was triaging, and then going over with the nurse practitioner. Kind of that's my day to day is triage. Go to the nurse practitioner, give the patient profile, discuss maybe what my thoughts are about the patient, what could be going wrong. The nurse practitioner visits them, goes through kind of their process with them and helps to diagnose maybe what they've got. Then they come to me and do the treatments, whether that's immunizations, whether that's, helping get the prescriptions turned in, all of those things that we need. And so it was kind of nice to see that process, because in an EMT process, you just kind of drop them at the hospital and say, have fun.
Right.
You don't quite get and I love the clinic. And that's, again, that summer really helped to reaffirm, like, I want to be a doctor because I want to be in that treatment side versus the stabilization and transport as an EMT.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So what advice do you have for someone in high school that might be interested in med school?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I would say is continue to take those math and science courses, continuing to challenge yourself in your courses, because, the engineering and the medical school pathway, it's a challenging pathway. It doesn't mean you can't do it by any means. It just means, you want to be ready for those challenges that you may have along the way. And so that's one of the things that I can tell a student, that's wanting to pursue that through high school. If you have the ability to take AP or college classes, it allows you to kind of get up to that level, that you'll be ready for college. And then on more of like an extracurricular side of things, if you have the ability to volunteer in a healthcare setting, do that. I think I volunteered at the Children's Hospital throughout my junior year of high school, and I volunteered at another place and then was a camp counselor. But again, having the volunteering allowed me to kind of, again, get more exposure to the hospital, because a lot of the times, especially kids or teens, their view of the hospital is like that's where they've only gone when they've been sick or a family member's been sick. But I haven't been on more of like, okay, let's start to get an idea of like, how do we treat people? So excuse me, again, getting involved with volunteering. A lot of the hospitals around here, now that we've kind of slowed with COVID a little bit, the hospitals have plenty of volunteer opportunities for you to be like greeter or help with just, there's all different types of positions that you can work in. And mine at the Children's Hospital was working with the families when they came in, helping to comfort if there were any other siblings with them. But then I also kind of got a role of like, when a nurse needs something, I can go run and grab it for them. So that's one of the big things, gets you some exposure, because again, if there's an uncomfortability with working in the hospital, or you've been in there and you're like, I don't think I could do this 9 to 5 every day, that's something to think about if that's going to be still the pathway that you want to go into, or there's another job in the healthcare industry, not just treating the patients, but doing healthcare administration or working with, physical therapy or occupational therapy. All those are great pathways that students can do that are not necessarily like traditional, like I'm going to be a doctor type thing, And then the other thing is like getting involved if you have any sort of ways, like I know some high schools have like, pre-health things or like professional studies kind of things. Like you can get a certified nursing assistant, a CNA in high school as well. Like my high school had that, where you could go into it as a semester long process that they would help you get ready for a CNA. So again, if you can have those abilities, maybe, or to look at getting an EMT license, sometimes you have to be 18 depending upon the state, but it allows you maybe to start to get an exposure to working in the industry. The last thing is shadowing. If you have a family member, a friend of yours, a family friend, reach out and ask them to shadow. And even if you don't, a lot of doctors are very willing to have a student come in and watch them for a day, and let you shadow them. So reach out, even if it's your personal doctor, like your pediatrician or your family doctor, reach out to them and talk to them, because a lot of the times they're there to let you kind of come in and do that. So it's kind of a cool, I say just try to get exposure is the big thing in high school. There's not a lot you can do like for a medical school application, because you generally don't want to talk about high school experiences on a medical school application. So there's not a lot that you can do to prepare for medical school application. It's really just getting yourself ready to go to that 4-year institution, because you need to do that in the US in order to go to medical school. So whereas other countries is a lot different. You don't go to a 4-year bachelor's degree before. So just getting yourself ready for college, but getting yourself some exposure if you can, reaching out to family, friends, your own doctor, that kind of thing. So,
that sounds like great advice.
Thank you. That's kind of what I did and what a lot of my friends did.
So let's see. We've talked about what you've done in college kind of to prepare for med school. I think we've covered that. Is there any, you've done research, you did internships, you've been involved in a lot of things on campus. Is there anything else that you've done during college that you think was helpful for your med school application, though?
Yeah. One of the things that I alluded to a little bit earlier and kind of talked about, but didn't really talk too much in detail, was actually getting an emergency medical technician license or an EMT license. So the summer after my freshman year of college, I didn't end up going for an internship. I decided, I was going to go home, spend some time at home and, work at the grocery store again, but then also get an EMT license. And that became kind of a good pathway for me. So it was over the summer 3-month class that I took to get myself ready for the national exam. And when I took it, I had passed it. So you earn the EMT license and you can come back and work. The EMT license and having some sort of certification, whether that's phlebotomy, certified nursing assistant or CNA, EMT, There's quite a few different, or medical assistant is another classification that you can get that helps you to get some exposure to the clinic and get you into it and actually allow you to treat. And a lot of those, areas, you have the ability to actually work with a patient, whether that's giving them, their medications, whether that's, helping to stabilize and transport them in an emergency situation, or working in a clinic and doing testing. It allows you the ability to kind of already start to interact with patients in a controlled environment and get you some exposure to being in patient care. Because again, on a college or on a medical school application, they want to see that, you've taken an interest in the industry and that you kind of know what caring for an individual is. And so that's kind of the cool thing about having that certification is you can also get a job just about anywhere. I mean, we're always hiring. We always need people. And so for me, I actually was able to get a job with the Purdue Fire Department.
Awesome.
We have our own advanced life support ambulance service and fire trucks here on campus that help to serve the population of Purdue. So I was able to take on a student role, which allowed me to work some of the special events. I was a lot of times like a third man on the ambulance or special events. And for me, I mean, like some of the most memorable ones, like I got to work the Indiana-Purdue basketball game last year. Cool. It was unfortunately the one we lost after beating them for like 15 years. Yeah, it was bad. But I was on the court during it. So because one of our roles during that is actually to help treat if there was any patient or player or coach emergencies, we would actually be the ones that would treat them. I stood on the court for the Indiana-Purdue game. I mean, in Mackey Arena was crazy and everyone was screaming and I was there on the court. It was a lot of fun. So I was wearing my red jacket. I was going to
say you were dressed in the wrong color.
I was, yeah. I was in my red EMT jacket. And my parents sent me a picture and they're like, "Are you an IU fan now?" And I'm like, "Oh no." I kind of saw it. So, but yeah, so it was a fun experience and it allowed me again to be able to treat. I mean, and it was kind of crazy. Like I would go into some of the buildings that I take classes in to help find someone and treat them, and and go into the co-rec where I would work out. Sometimes I would go in there to help someone who fell and twist their ankle and needs to go to the hospital. So it was a really kind of rewarding experience to be able to kind of help know that I'm giving back to also the community here at Purdue and being able to treat people for their health. So that's one of the fun things that I was involved in. I really enjoyed being an EMT here. And again, allows you to build those patient care hours that are needed for a medical school application. Those are things, unfortunately, there's a lot now that's being required. A lot of students that's why a lot of students are taking gap years now actually because it's hard to balance. I mean, and engineering coursework and activities. And that's the other thing is you can't get involved in everything. There's just no way you have the time. So finding what your passions are and getting involved in them is a great kind of avenue. So for me, EMT was a great one. And building those hours. But that's why actually, a lot of students are taking gap years between it. It's becoming more and more popular. Like the average age to go to medical school is now 25, which is like 3 years of gap years.
Oh my goodness.
A lot more non-traditional students, a lot more kind of, students that have gone to the industry and worked and then are like, oh, I actually want to be a doctor. So they go back. So, and allows them to build that time, those patient care hours, those research hours, allows them some more ability to kind of delve into their studies. Because that's the one thing that I would say, for me, I wish I had more time to do that. It's just balancing I knew I always wanted to go to medical school, so that's how I was preparing myself to do.
Sure. So you had a focused goal and you knew the kind of the pieces to that puzzle that needed to happen.
Right. Yeah. The biggest ones are research, is patient care, is volunteering. Those are your big ones, and then getting your degree, of course, and excelling in that. But
that's important.
That is important. You got to have that. But yeah, so those are the kind of the things that you need to be able to go to medical school now, and putting all those pieces together is going to look different for every single person. The types of activities you can get involved in, the clubs, those things are different. It really should follow your passions.
So how did you get involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters?
Yeah. Again, so I grew up going to a summer camp, and then I moved into a staff assistant role there as I was in middle school. Then when I got to high school, I had the ability, I think it was 16 and older, you could be a camp counselor. Okay. So I'd always been a camp counselor growing up. I loved summer camp. I loved working with kids again. And it was just a lot of fun. I knew that was something that I enjoyed as a kid, so I want to make sure I can give that great experience to other kids of learning about nature and those things. And so when I came to Purdue, I actually kind of felt a void in my life when I wasn't doing camp counselor. I wasn't doing, some of those really kind of, some of those roles like working in the children's hospital. So I was like, how can I give back to my community, still work and be a mentor for children? And so I found Big Brothers Big Sisters, and there's plenty of organizations that work with kids on our campus, but Big Brothers I had heard about, but never really had gotten involved in. And so we have a Purdue chapter that's hosted by Purdue students that helps to throw events for kids who have not been matched yet. So kids who don't have a big brother or a big sister just yet, who are waiting waiting for one in our community.
Okay.
And we have a list of, we're up to like 10 or 15 kids now that are still waiting. So, we have a chunk of children who don't have that mentor in their lives. So we're able to kind of throw monthly events for them, pair up with our office in Lafayette that we work closely with, and really kind of, be able to give them kind of a day of just like, hey, here's a college student.
Yeah.
Here's like a fun person in your life that you can talk to if you need anything. And so it was a great organization. So I got involved with that and kind of moved up, and there were some leadership roles that had opened up. So I applied and kind of got within that. And it's just really been such a rewarding experience. And now I have actually a little brother in our community as well. So again, it's just been really nice to be able to give back and work with kids and be that positive mentor in their life. Because like the little boy who I'm a big brother for, he actually doesn't have any siblings. Or they're much older. So there's not like a sibling in the house. Like I grew up with an older brother. There's not that sibling in the house for them. And so, or sometimes, there's broken family relationships. And so for me, it was really kind of great to be able to kind of be that big brother if you needed to talk about something, or just, sometimes just go out and throw the ball is like the most therapy that you can have ever, is just being outside and being with someone that you enjoy. So
and I can see how college students being involved is so important, because you're so much closer to age than, for example, someone
Sure, no. And that's again the cool thing, because a lot of the college students that come here to Purdue like have younger siblings that they're used to kind of being there for, whether it's like driving them to classes and stuff, and you lose that void, and then you're kind of like, well, what's missing from my life right now? And a lot of times it's caring for that younger sibling. And so for me, I didn't have a younger sibling, but it was just nice to be able to it was that kind of that camp counselor of like, you had a group of kids that you got to know, and they got to know you, and you got to be kind of that person to be kind of what they looked up to. Because I know I looked up to people growing up as well. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So fantastic. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I'm reading my notes here. So we talked about doing research. So we've talked about some of your fondest memories. Are there other memories that we've not talked about?
Ooh.
Looking back on, 4 years.
4 years, yeah. Now I'm at 4 years. One of the big ones that that always sticks out of my mind, Purdue is a Big Ten school. Again, one of the reasons I ended up choosing to come to Purdue actually was because of, it being a Big Ten school. We've got thousands of opportunities, but also we've got Big Ten sports. And that was something that was really big for me. I was looking at schools that, like in New York that, don't have sports teams, or I was looking at other schools that, maybe they're school pride isn't as strong as I maybe wanted it to be, because I know in high school I was very much like a, very prideful student in my school. And so I loved going to the basketball games and the football games. And our most recent year this year in basketball was awesome. Our Final Four run and going to the national championship. And it's been a great year so far. Plus it gives me bragging rights over my brother who goes to Nebraska. They have yet to go to a bowl game. And actually I think have a winning season yet. So it's been nice to kind of brag on him, but also just the tailgates, like just the experience of Purdue. Purdue just lights up on those weekends when it's, Big Ten football. And now with like Oregon and UCLA coming to the conference, it's only going to get bigger and bigger. And it just, that to me is what stuck out as the most, is just going with my friends, going and meeting their families at their tailgates, having my parents here for a tailgate, and just going to the games. And basketball alike and football. And then we started going to a lot of the baseball games. We got pretty good this year. Unfortunately, our tournament wasn't as great, but again, just rooting on the students, and just being some pride and being a Boilermaker.
Yeah, there is really something about being part of the Boilermaker family.
It is.
You just can't.
You can't put words on it.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a part of you, it's just that kind of inside.
You're part of the family.
It is. and that was the cool thing is I would see students working alongside me in the classroom, work really hard. We're all in engineering, we're working, long hours. And then on Saturdays, it's like, we don't even talk about engineering anymore. We just go to the games.
Yeah.
And it's nice to kind of, have that stress-free environment with other, students and faculty. And, I would see my professors at the game sometimes and wave and say, hello, how's it going? And so it's just kind of fun to have that back and forth between the two.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. So we've talked pretty much everything on our list that we're going to cover today. The last thing I think would be, if you could change one thing about your journey so far, what would that be?
Ooh, yeah. I actually was thinking about this one leading up to this.
Do you need to look at your notes?
Yeah, actually, I remembered it now. I was kind of peeking over at my notes, what I kind of said about this one. And there were two things that maybe stick out to me the most.
Mm-hmm.
The first one being doing a longer term study abroad. So by having this extra semester that I graduated early, I could have maybe studied abroad a little bit more, studied a language. In high school, I actually studied abroad in Taiwan to study Chinese. And I really missed that part of myself. And I still speak a little bit of Chinese, but it's definitely not where it was when I was living in Taiwan. And so I got to do a Maymester, so I got to do 2 weeks abroad in Scandinavia, which was absolutely beautiful. I loved it. But I never got the chance to really like delve into it for a full semester. And I think that was really one of the things that I would change a little bit more was maybe space out my timing. I think I tried multiple times to make it work and it just didn't quite work. But maybe in that semester, that I was applying for medical school or after maybe that senior year, that first semester, I would have done it. And I think that could have been a good experience. And so it would maybe be one thing that I would change. And then the last thing would be, maybe looking at a gap year. So I was very, very in my mind of I'm going to be graduating in 4 years and going to go to medical school. And it's kind of what I had been told growing up is if I want to do that, that's the path. And I didn't want to take time off. But being in this position now, kind of being off for a little bit and being in a full-time work position, a gap year may not have been a bad idea. Taking a little bit longer of a time. There's no rush. I mean, to go to medical school right now. And yes, there was kind of when I came into college, I was like, I need to go.
Right.
But after now being in this and growing up a little bit, I'm like, I kind of want to take some time off maybe and travel or work in like in a corporate position or something for a little while. And some of the people that I've talked to that are going to be my classmates up in Milwaukee, those are going to be like some of those people, they took off 2-3 years. And it's kind of rewarding to see what they've been able to accomplish, what they've been able to do, but also they have a different perspective than myself. And so that would be one thing that maybe I would change, those two things, study abroad and then maybe take a gap year, maybe look at stretching my studies out a little bit more and not trying to rush into it. I don't think I rushed or hurt myself by doing what I did, but it could have been maybe a little bit of a different experience. But it's not something I necessarily knew, something I learned now. So
Well, I mean, that makes total sense because so many students coming into especially engineering at Purdue are so
far ahead.
Yeah, they're so far ahead and they're so, I gotta do honors. I've got to do this. I got to double major versus no, just breathe.
Yes.
Just breathe and enjoy the college experience.
100%.
Take advantage of everything.
You need to. I was wrapped up in that a little bit coming out of high school. I think there's a little, and I was in COVID time, so it was a little bit more of like, I need to get out of the house. I need to do something. But I think, I've had that conversation a lot in this position. I know you as well. I've had those conversations for students. Take a breath, enjoy life. You're never going to be these middle, 18 to 22 again. Don't rush it. I mean, you're already ahead. If you're doing AP classes, I mean, you've already started your coursework. If you've already started to take some college classes, great. Don't rush into it. I think too many people are trying to rush through life right now. That, take some time. And that's why I've had a lot of reflection over this last semester and watching kind of my roommates graduate and being on that side. It's like, wow, I could have really taken a chill pill a little bit and kind of relax a little bit. Yes, it's good to be driven and don't, not be driven, but live your life a little bit. It's okay if you're not in calculus 3 coming in as a high school senior. I mean, take a breath. It's great. I'm so glad, we have these tenacious students. We have students that want to do that. But at the end of the day, live your life a little bit. Travel, see the world, meet new people, get involved in clubs. It's not all about the academics. And that's what I've really seen is that college itself is developing you as a person outside of your studies. I mean, it gives you the ability to kind of look into your life and becoming an adult is not just about the job that you're going to do or the class you're going to take. It's the relationships, the experiences, the things you have along the way. That's what makes life. And so I got a little philosophical there, but
no, I love that.
It's definitely changed my perspective.
It's that work-life balance.
It is.
And you can't be successful at one if you're not doing the other.
Exactly. I struggled a lot with that my sophomore year. It was a very busy semester for me and I struggled with that work-life balance. And now being in a job or being in a little bit more of like a relaxed senior year, it's so important to your mental health, to your physical health, to everything, to your well-being. I mean, you need to just have that balance. I mean, it's great to be ahead, but take some time for your own and learn something new, pick up a hobby, do something that's not school related. And I think you'll find you'll learn a lot of skills not related to school that are so, so important to your life. Read a book, I mean, learn something, like learn a new like finance thing. I mean, and look at the stock market, do something else than your pathway, because you'll learn a lot more, I think, in life than sometimes just the books.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, great job. I think I just want to end it there.
Okay, yeah.
Because I think that's a good spot to end
Thank
it
you.
on. Nick, thank you so much
course.
again for everything that you've done for OFE.
Thank you.
It has been a joy to have you working here.
It's been a
in the
pleasure
office.
working with all of you.
And so, again, we wish you the best
Thank
as
you.
you go off to med school. Reluctantly letting you go to
I
med
know.
school.
I'm like, oh no, I do actually have to leave. So it's sad. But I know this is a see you later. I'll be around. I'll be back to campus, so you guys will be up there. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Nick.
Of
very
course.
much. And thank you all for joining us for this special version of Behind the Mic podcast.